Our next speaker is Dr. Bala Venkat. He is going to talk on functional regional anesthesia and anatomy. And do you really want me to introduce him? Just a brief introduction. He is the founder president of Association of Regional Anesthesiologists. He is a consultant anesthesiologist at Ganga Hospital, Coimbatore. He has been the chairman as well as organizing secretary of numerous national conferences. He is a certified instructor for comprehensive trauma life support since 2007. He has won a lot of best student awards in BJ Medical College as well as PGI Chandigarh. And he was the invited faculty for World Congress of Anesthesiologists at Cape Town, South Africa recently. Okay, Dr. Bala Venkat, please.
Good morning to all of you. I think today is very special. And I take this opportunity to pray the Almighty to bestow His wishes on the newly formed the Academy of Regional Anesthesia of India. It's long due. It's been a dream. And in the march of this nation to become a developed nation, it's imperative that every specialty grows to its fullest. Every specialty grows to an extent that is equal to that of a developed country. And we know the American Society of Regional Anesthesia, the European Society of Regional Anesthesia have gone far ahead and have done pioneering work. So we never had a platform to propagate one of the most important forms of anesthesia of this era, the regional anesthesia. So I think the dream has come true. At this juncture, I would like to extend my very sincere thanks to two people who really worked and slogged to get the various nuances done for the formation of this academy, Dr. Vrushali Ponde and Dr. Satish Kulkarni. And this organization, I think they require a real round of applause. They slogged a lot of days to get this academy being formed, getting registered. And it was equally supported by regional anesthesia enthusiasts from various parts of this country, especially Dr. TVS Gopal from Hyderabad, Dr. Sandeep Diwan from Meerut, Dr. Ashit Mehta from Sholapur. So collectively today we stand before you. And each one of you, I am sure that would become an inherent component of this academy in moving this forward. The next 20 minutes, I would be sharing with you on the functional regional anesthesia anatomy. It was way back in 1922, the first proper regional anesthetic book came into vogue, and that was the textbook of regional anesthesia by Gaston Labat. And Gaston Labat had asked Dr. William Mayo to write the foreword for this book. And it's pertinent to recall what the great surgeon, Dr. William Mayo, had to say. The young surgeon should perfect himself in the use of regional anesthesia, which increases in value with the increase in skill with which it is administered. I do not look forward to the day when regional anesthesia will wholly displace general anesthesia, but undoubtedly it will reach and hold a very high position in surgical practice. This was quoted he said in 1922. Dr. David Brown adds, in the introductory remarks of his very famous regional anesthesia book. Perhaps if the current generation of both surgeons and anesthesiologists had kept Mayo's concept in mind, our patients would be the real beneficiaries. What has happened in the past nearly a century, to sum it up, we have the words of one of the real pioneers of regional anesthesia in Europe, Barry Fisher, who recently won the highest award of the ASRA, the Carl Kohler Gold Medal Award for the year 2009 was presented to him. And in his talk, he said, "I have been practicing regional anesthesia for the past 35 years. I have remained convinced that safe and effective regional anesthesia offers benefits which general anesthesia and systemic opioids cannot match." But I think that in a nutshell, we need to give the best form of balanced anesthesia to our patient, irrespective of whether it's general and regional. And most importantly, we need to incorporate these two techniques whenever possible to get the best of the benefits of the both. So surgeons and anesthesiologists of the early era did not hesitate to supplement their blocks with general anesthesia. They did not expect each block to be 100% perfect. This I thought is very pertinent because as the anesthesia grew as a super specialty, we thought every block that we give has to be 100% successful. Otherwise, it hurts the ego of the anesthesiologist, and the surgeon thinks that the block has failed. But I think we have to move out from this, and when you go to the roots, it says, David Brown again summarizes, to be safe and successful in carrying out regional anesthesia, we must be willing to get back to our roots and embrace the concept of these early workers who did not hesitate to supplement their regional blocks. So the bottom line is we need to provide a safe regional anesthetic technique, and when the block has failed, don't hesitate to give a supplemental general anesthesia. Never we have to say that the block has taken and try to give them a lot of sedation behind the screen and produce a very adverse event to the patient. What is the easiest thing that you can make, even if you're not a cook in this world, is to make a cup of lime juice. The ingredients are very definite. It requires a lemon, it requires chill water, it requires sugar, or it requires some salt, as the taste may be. But if you give it to few different people, you know the difference. It doesn't taste the same. One is very nice and the other is sour, but the ingredients have been the same. What does this indicate? It indicates there has been something invisible in this individual which made a difference in the outcome. And similarly, the outcome of regional anesthesia, there is something invisible within you, each of you, which would make a huge difference between the success of a block and the failure of block. And to become a part of the invisible thing getting inside you, the basic is to know a very strong, functional, regional anatomy, which can be supplemented by adequate gadgets like peripheral nerve stimulator and ultrasound. But the basis is the anatomy, without which we are bound to make mistakes. We are bound to land up in specific problems, and hence the importance of the anatomy. Before I go to the anatomy, I think it's very important for us to know about the structure of a nerve. If you see, what is a nerve? It's composition of multiple axons. The individual axons remain in the form of a fascicle, and they are covered by a structure called the endoneurium. So you see the axonal fibers, you see the fascicles, they are covered by the endoneurium. And the endoneurium is covered by a perineurium. And multiple, if you see here, or if you see this, these are all the units. In between you have the non-neural tissues and multiple layers of this perineural bundles are covered by an epineurium. Why is this very important? To know about the structure is very important because one of the most common things that we discuss is neural injury following a nerve block. Is that if you use a paresthesia technique, how many of you here use paresthesia technique? Can you please raise your hand? A large number of us use still paresthesia technique in this country. So if we use a paresthesia technique, what is that we are worried about? Injuring the nerve. Because you elicit a paresthesia, that means you are touching the nerve fiber and then you are injecting the drug. Now the question is that one injection or one prick that you make, does it produce the neurological damage or is it something more than that? It is not the one small prick that you pierce the nerve, that doesn't produce a definitive neurological injury. But what actually produces a neurological injury is because when you prick this nerve and when you administer the local anesthetic solution intraneuronally, the problem happens. What happens if you inject it intraneuronally? Suppose if the tip of your needle is crossed this epineurium and you are injecting the drug into this place. What it does is, suppose, how many of you use lignocaine with adrenaline? Yes, most of us use adrenaline. So what happens is, this is the extrinsic vessel, it goes into vasoconstriction. Because of this vasoconstriction, from this extrinsic vessels, we have the blood supply going to the intrinsic vessels there, which actually give the nourishment to the axons. Because of the vasospasm that happens here, it produces decreased blood supply to the intrinsic vessel and a decreased nutrition to the axon, which triggers an ischemic episode to the axonal fiber, producing the neurological damage. That's number one. Number two, if the tip of the needle has pierced the epineurium and it has pierced the perineurium, and if you inject the drug within this, the pressure in between the fascicles, it's been found on animal research, if it goes more than 600 millimeters of mercury, it happens because it's a very closed space. It produces mechanical damage to the fascicles, producing an axonopathy. This is exactly what happens when we talk about a needle stick injury to the nerve. I thought this is a very important anatomical aspect that we all have to know, that why a neural injury happens. So one prick doesn't produce. It's mainly the deposition of the drug